This episode is brought to you by VPP Simplified. Now you can get element by element tracking and guidance for your VPP journey. Every aspect of the VPP requirements in one easy-to-use interactive spreadsheet. Achieving VPP star status can be tough, but understanding what it takes to get there can be simplified. This VPP Gap tool will help you do that. Go to vppsimplified.com for more information.
Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Welcome to another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. This is a special episode. We're going to have a takeover of my podcast. The Gen Suite team down in Cincinnati, Ohio, recently invited me to be a guest speaker on their podcast, The Voice of Gen Suite, and I am going to play that recording for you in this episode. Now, before I get into who Gen Suite actually is and what they do, which is going to be very important to you, I want to stop and talk a little bit about our partners in safety for this podcast. First of which is who'sonlocation.com. Look, if you're like me, you've had to manage facilities, you've had to manage workplaces, you want to know who's on location, whether it's visitors, contractors, or even your own personnel, even at other locations. Well, digital-based, cloud-based, technology, automation, whatever you want to call it, that's the way to go. If you want real-time alerts and information as to who's on location at any of your sites across the world, you need to know who's on location. Go to who'sonlocation.com to read some more information about their service. But I'm going to tell you right now, just a few of the things that you can do. One, you can have, they support kiosk sign-in, self-sign-in, self-check-in. They have web apps that are available for download for not just your employees, but also contractors to be able to sign in, check in, so you know when they're at remote locations as well. You even have the ability to use their evacuation management tool as well for evacuations of buildings, facilities. You can actually, even remotely, you could see in real time who's checking in at their, off the roster of who's safe and who's not safe. There's just too much to go into in the short amount of time I have introing this podcast. But I'm telling you right now, if you want a digital, cloud-based, semi-automated solution to people management in general, you need to go to who'sonlocation.com. Get a free 30-day trial, no strings attached, no credit card required, free 30-day trial. See for yourself. Who'sonlocation.com. Another fantastic partner in safety for this podcast. Look, show some love to our partners. They help make it happen every week. You need to know who the official floor marking, floor sign company is of the Safety Pro podcast. That's none other than Mighty Line Floor Tape. Mighty Line Floor Tape. Stop painting your floors. If you need custom signs, you need aisles marked, fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, directional signs for your floors, warehouse, production floor, doesn't matter. They have the solution for you. Look, their floor tape, 7 times thicker than the average floor tape. Its beveled edge makes it perfect for forklift traffic. It's easy to remove with very little adhesive remaining behind. It's really, really simple. They have a great video showing the time it takes to install their floor tape versus painting. It's incredible. You're going to save a ton of time and material, and your floors, your factory, your warehouse, they're going to look fantastic. Oh, and their floor signs, you can use your own custom high-res logos and images. Get a free sample. Don't take my word for it. Get a free sample sent right to you. See for yourself. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Fill out the information, get a free sample. While you're there, check out past episodes of the Safety Pro podcast. Fantastic partners in safety. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Okay, Gen Suite. What is Gen Suite? Well, basically, it's a comprehensive suite of cloud-based EHS management software solutions, okay? If you're looking for a software solution, cloud-based software solution, to help you manage all of your programs, safety concerns, injuries, illnesses, near misses, set up a calendar of compliance actions that need to take place and when, and assign those to people in your organization. This is the suite of software you need to have. I've used Gen Suite for years. No, they're not affiliated with this podcast in any capacity. It is a tool that I've used, I've relied on as a safety professional. That's what I do with this podcast. I share with you the tools and information that I have found useful, that I rely on, that I know will help you. So you should check out gensuite.com, GENSUITE.com. Go ahead, check it out, read about, what they have to offer. But, basically for over 20 years, they've helped companies establish safe and sustainable workplace environments all over the world. They offer intuitive applications for rapid configuration and deployment within your organization. Look, over 600,000 users trust GenSuite with their compliance and EHS software needs. You can too. Go to gensuite.com for more information about GenSuite. Again, no affiliation, just a tool I rely on that I use every day actually now. So I want to go ahead and play the episode from the voice of GenSuite. I'll have a link in the show notes as well. But this episode, we talked about wearables, the implications for EHS, the future of wearable technology, what GenSuite's looking at as far as wearables goes, and how they're innovating within their organization to help businesses like mine and yours. So without further ado, here is the voice of GenSuite.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Voice of GenSuite. I'll be your host and moderator today. My name is Jenny Yu. On today's episode, we are talking about the connected worker. For the last decade, we've seen the rise of mobile technology make its way into our workers' hands. It started with smartphones, but now we are seeing other technologies make their way into our lives as well, such as wearables. Smart watches and smart glasses have been gaining momentum and making their way into the employee workflow. GenSuite's virtual assistant Jenny beta version also triggered interest from companies to implement such virtual assistant on mobile or desktop platforms to assist employee or team's day-to-day work. With me to discuss this topic of the connected worker today is our special guest, Blaine Hoffman from the Safety Pro podcast. Blaine, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. I'd also like to welcome GenSuite's Vice President of Business Development, Strategy and Innovation, Doug Martin. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be speaking on such a hot topic.
Great. Thanks for coming here. To kick off our conversation, I'd like to start with our guest, Blaine. What kind of smartphone technology have you been able to work with or see implemented on site?
Oh, man, all kinds of stuff. First, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here with the GenSuite team and talk about this stuff. Smartphones, I remember, I'm going to date myself. I remember when I got my first Pocket PC. It was an HP Pocket PC. I only have one person in the room nodding their head.
So 2003 timeframe?
Yeah. Windows XP Mobile Edition, or the tablet, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first tablet they
so you strayed away from the Palm device.
Yeah, so I went away from Palm, and I started looking at using those to do inspections and audits. And if you think about it, the smartphone today is just like that. It's just you have the ability to make phone calls. As my teenage daughter likes to ask me if that's still an option on her iPhone to make phone calls. But you can do so many things with them. And the biggest advantage I've seen, the most widely used advantage of the smartphone is to just do inspections, being able to do audits and inspections and get away from clipboards or even dragging a laptop around. It's made it really easy to do inspections and take photos, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. Many of our customers are implementing our mobile app for their auditing and inspection programs.
It's probably our most widely adopted platform or application is the inspection module.
I like photos. I like the stickers and drawing on the photos. I don't see many other folks using that effectively. So that's a really good feature that I like about the GenSuite mobile app.
And especially with the offline capability. So even facilities without a site without the internet connection, they can still complete the checklist.
Yeah.
Great. Move on to the next question. So what kind of wearable technology have you seen implemented that has caught your interest, Blaine?
Smart glasses, I think, they were really kind of creepy to the general public when they launched, but they really took off in the workplace. But I think that's very intriguing. I'm interested to see the direction that goes. And not to get too futurist, but smart fabrics, I think, are very intriguing for folks that are working remotely in hot conditions, confined spaces, things like that, where you can monitor biometrics for workers. I'm really intrigued to see where that goes.
How about your thoughts, Doug?
I like the idea there, Blaine, of these smart fabrics. I had seen, or what perked my interest was more of the exoskeleton as a starting point. I know a couple of our subscribers are starting to experience this or pilot them and really find ways for safely lifting those heavy loads, finding a way to prevent those back injuries or the pulls and the strains and sprains. So that's one that really catches my eye just because of how different and unique it is. But aside from that, I like the wearable tech for the sensor side. So what you're talking about with integrated fabric, I was thinking about it from the kind of heart rate monitoring, blood pressure monitoring, and how if companies that are deploying these with their employees can start tracking this data, how they can start to analyze it. Because not only can you identify when you're going into an area that has radiation exposure, you can stop yourself from going too far in. Or you can start to look at things like blood pressure. If people are working at heights, depending on the employee, how high they're traveling, et cetera, and you can start to adjust the way that you're managing their risk assessment or the PPE assigned to them to make it a safer experience for that employee. Now, it's a little bit of a far-fetched right now, but there's a lot of data that these are collecting that's going untouched. So those are a couple of the areas in smart tech that I've been really interested in over the past couple of years.
That's all exciting stuff. Yeah, the future is just going to get better with this stuff. But I'm a geek, so I like the technology.
Thanks, both. So Blaine, just like you mentioned, smart glass entered the market a couple of years back, and the focus of the implementation has been more and more shifted towards the work environment, and it has already seen certain result and positive feedback. So could you drill down a little bit further to talk about some of the use cases you've seen companies are most interested to use smart glass for?
Yeah, I think I can go to the private sector and also the military side. I've seen with the Air Force using more of a heads-up display type of technology in their visors, and how you can kind of shrink that down and do a similar approach for private sector. I can imagine somebody out in a wind farm doing a service call, how many 100 feet up in the air, and having smart glasses and being able to need both hands and not be able to have to pull a phone out to be able to verbally call up, either a video call or a voice call through Bluetooth, but also be able to see schematics, instructions, things like that, remotely, sort of that heads-up display type of thing. That's the thing I've seen used recently is for maintenance technicians that are remote. I think it's exciting. I like the idea of smart glasses. I'd like to see it get developed a little bit more in industry. I don't know. I think a lot of people made the call when it was, it hit the general market of, I don't think we want to see people walking around with these, but in the workplace, it makes total sense.
Then what's your opinion about the potential risk or potential distraction that could be put to the employee using these smart glasses if you have the heads-up display?
Yeah, so cognitive distractions, obviously when we're driving, operating equipment, that could be an issue. I think the trick is to, one, not just integrate technology more and more into our lives for the sake of doing it, but it should have a purpose, right? It should support the work we need to do in a safe and efficient manner. I think where it has some applications, where on the software side, being able to recognize when we're in a vehicle or operating equipment, some things won't function properly. But if you think about taking your eyes away from, the forward-looking view, if you're operating a piece of equipment and look down at a dashboard to a gauge or something and look away, there are some opportunities, I think, to kind of bring that up front and center where your head is forward and you're looking in the direction you're traveling. So a heads-up display type of approach might benefit safety and limit distractions. I think it's something that should be explored, certainly.
Thanks.
It's also some of what companies today or have had in place with smartphone bans out on the shop floor. Because people are walking around the facilities, not paying attention to the yellow striping, the hazard striping, just staring at their phone. It's caused some injuries. So I agree that heads-up display really starts to, while it doesn't replace your phone, you're still going to have that accessible. It does start to get you kind of upright and looking back around the facility to make sure you're not in harm's way.
I agree. Yeah.
So, Doug, you already mentioned about the wearable sensors. There are so many different types of wearable sensors in the industrial world today. So could you share some examples your customers have piloted or deployed or talked about for worker safety, and perhaps they've already received positive feedback about them?
It's a good question. I know the folks at GE Appliances, a hire company, have started exploring the exoskeleton concept. I know that a couple of our employees were down with them for an EHS summit, and the EHS team was getting the opportunity to try them out for the first time. So it was going into pilot. So that's probably one of the kind of early adopters for that. Aside from that, I know that we heard at our customer conference this year that the folks from ThyssenKrupp were doing some of the heads-up display and Google Glass adoption, where they were doing it in the elevator shafts from a lockout perspective or from an equipment maintenance perspective. So those are some of the examples that folks are actually going out to. Where on the other side I've heard is there's concern. I had an opportunity to present at a process safety summit earlier this year, and we were talking primarily about change management. So we had all these process safety change management leaders in the room, and we brought up the idea of wearable tech. And all of them kind of raised their hand and perked up and said, how are we going to evaluate the impact of change on that? So I'll put it back, Blaine, to you on that one. What are your thoughts on how do you introduce a change management evaluation around smart tech?
So was the concern about the safety implications, whether some of these devices are intrinsically safe in some of the chemical atmospheres?
That's part of it, but It's also introducing something new into the floor regardless. Your mobile phone's one thing.
Right.
Google Glasses, are they break resistant? Are they intrinsically safe? Were some of the conversations brought up?
Certainly having an ANSI rated safety glasses, smart glass option is going to be a concern for safety professionals. I've looked at that as well, and I know there are some out there available. Yeah, just having a robust review process and a team to look at the potential impact both to the wearer and the environment they're going to go in, how resilient it will be, will this technology react in certain atmospheres in a negative way? That's all stuff that's got to be vetted. Certainly, we could start with ANSI and Underwriters Laboratories to make sure that the devices we're using are appropriate for the workplace. But yeah, that's something that has to be vetted, certainly.
Yeah, just to add, one of the smart glass provider GenSuite has been talking with and working with RealWear. They have the intrinsically safe model, HMT1Z1 model, which is, I think, the only product probably certified for intrinsically safe. So, quite a few companies from oil and gas industry, chemical operation industry are interested to potentially utilize that model.
Another option might be to look at, I know there are companies, I don't know if FLIR is one of them, but in the fire industry for firefighters, there are heads-up display types of, for the full face shield, full face masks, I should say. And I mean, they're going into some pretty harsh environments. And, as a former firefighter myself, I would have loved to have some of that stuff. We had the old boxes that we had to carry on us that would just beep and they have tones, and we would have to recognize what that tone meant. An alert or a heads-up display would have been fantastic, especially because you can't see. You can see your inside of your face mask, but you can't see, depending upon the fire that you're in, you can't see 5 feet in front of your face. So they're being used now. I think it's just a matter of where can we leverage what's already been developed, and how can we adopt them into other and see where they apply in other areas of work.
I think the other area that our EHS community is always trying to figure out is, who do you get involved in a company in order to vet, to try it out, to pilot one of these smart tech concepts? Our friends from Lilly over in Indianapolis, Indiana, I know that they're looking forward to it. EHS is one piece of a bigger puzzle with operations, corporate IT, et cetera, involved. Any guidance for how to properly steer through that maze?
As far as getting folks in the organization to adopt this stuff,
comfortable
or to
with
try it,
able to try it out, correct?
Oh, wow. You're probably going to get feedback on this one. Start with millennials. You got to have the right culture. Change is tough for, most people. And when we're talking about handing somebody a smartphone versus wearing some, glasses that have a camera and a microphone, it raises some concerns. So you've got to be careful with the, match the device with the culture and the pace that you release these things. But starting small with a group of folks that are willing to try some things out, that understand the value, and maybe that's where you start the value proposition, right? What problem is this going to solve? Is it going to make our work more efficient, more safe? You start with that, and you get a small group of people to try it out. But the proof is in the pudding. Social proof is huge. I mean, just look out in the general market with any technology. My kids are a perfect example. If they saw all their other friends using something, they're going to want it too. They're going to see the value in it. So that social proof, seeing their coworkers use it, I think is a good in.
Mm-hmm.
IT, getting a strong IT department. IT has grown a lot. Right, it's no longer just the guy or gal, the tech nerd that sits in a room and helps me with when my email goes down. These are big players in business, and they have a seat at the board table. And technology drives a lot of companies now, so it's a big deal. I think you've got to have that value proposition. You've got to get the right people to try this stuff, and it's got to solve a problem.
And it's happening in organizations already. It's just that not everyone at the facility knows.
Right.
So it's also helping to identify that and share the information, share the success stories, so that additional functions, not just an operations group or whatnot, can benefit from it.
Right.
Great. Now we can switch gear to virtual assistant topic. Doc, could you share a little bit about the vision of GenSuite to build Jenny, which is GenSuite Virtual Assistant, within the GenSuite software platform?
Sure. I was thinking back about this one because we've had the concept of our virtual assistant, Jenny, for a couple of years. And if I'm not mistaken, the original concept was we wanted to build something that would aid employees in logging or finding some initial data points. So how can you enable an employee to walk up to a kiosk to submit a concern report? But over the past 12 to 18 months, it's really changed with the introduction of Alexa or Google's Assistant, et cetera. It's really changed things. Instead of just how do I get something into a product or get that one data record, to be more of a true personal assistant. So I know most recently we've come out with things like product briefs, where as a site EHS leader, it's going to tell me the recent incidents that have occurred since I last logged into GenSuite. So where we're moving forward with it is looking at what else can we do? How can we expand upon the data that we're tracking about your personal pathway through GenSuite, what data you're putting in, what reports you're running on a routine basis, and start to prompt you with information to say, we notice that you run this report on a weekly basis. Here's the information for you, instead of requiring you to go into GenSuite, go back to that report, and execute that type of report. So it's been a real kind of change of environments with where we started and really where we're headed with it. But it's been an exciting thing. And I know, again, our user conference, we really introduced it out to everyone in a broad base, and it was extremely well adopted. And Jenny, I know that you have been tracking some of the requests that have been going through, and it's not just for FAQs. People aren't just looking for guidance on how to use GenSuite. They're trying to figure out how to become more productive within the tool.
Yes, definitely a great point. Apparently, a lot of our users have very high expectation of Jenny, so they've been inputting or asking many new questions and commands, which Jenny needs to grow in order to master those commands. So very exciting roadmap and vision you just mentioned.
And I know that we're also adding probably 1 to 2 different commands into Jenny on a weekly basis right now.
Yes.
We are expanding what's offered, what's available, and what users can get into. And I think we have to figure out what's the next step there, which is sharing all of those new stories and new commands, new options with our broad-based user community.
Yes. Blaine, so what do you think of the value such kind of virtual assistant along with artificial intelligence technology can bring to companies' management programs and processes?
I'm a techie. I love this stuff. Alexa in several rooms in my house. I use this stuff all the time. I definitely see the value, and Doug, I like what you said about sort of a daily news flash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Type of approach where, I could go into the office and I could say, Jenny, give me an update or whatever. I can get an update on any events that occurred.
While you're getting your briefcase out, you're getting your files structured for the day or mentally prepared.
I love that.
Listing it off.
When can I get that? That's a great idea. I would love that. It's sort of a nice spin on the old visual dashboard where I would have to log in and pull it up and see the current state of things. I could get it dictated to me. So
exactly.
That's a fantastic idea.
Ends up being an add-on, if you will, to your schedule. Because one of the first things I think we all do when we come into the office is we look at our calendar. What meeting do we have first? Are we prepared for everything? This is one adder onto that. As you're processing that, you can get the list of what are the key actions that are assigned to you and due today.
I love that. I like the idea of being able to log a safety concern or a suggestion out on the shop floor with just verbal commands.
Mm-hmm.
I have my smartwatch. I would love to be able to do that without having to pull the phone out. Being able to, as I think of things, be able to just do the vocal command, the voice command, and log something, make a note of something. I like it. I like that AI will. Again, it gets kind of weird. Some people freak out about this stuff, but I think it's inevitable. It's coming. It is here now. I mean, there isn't anything we can lament all we want, but it's happening. So I think the idea is to see how we can control more of it and integrate it reasonably within our daily lives. But in the workplace, I think AI is very critical. You got everything, the Internet of Things, machine learning, AI, all this stuff. To me, it's about how can they work seamlessly together? How can we integrate? I mean, like we mentioned, smart fabric, glasses, smart glasses, watches, sensors. They all exist now, but how can we string them together in one? I don't know if ecosystem is the right word, but under one sort of system that they all can kind of talk to each other and we can take advantage of them. That's what I would like to see more of, because we have all this out there, but they're almost proprietary and they're separated.
And I think some of the fear is there's so much data being collected. How do I know what point to track?
Right.
And what we've talked about internally, I know even with our CEO, was you don't have to try and analyze every data point. Each one of these companies can tell you what are the exceptions. So with the smart fabric in the future, it can tell you once things get above a certain temperature. So you're not tracking the normal everyday, everything's good, but once it hits a certain threshold, then it can trigger an event. So from a GenSuite perspective, it could log your event for you. It could notify your EHS team. It could notify the employee's supervisor, whoever was wearing said equipment or in a certain part of the plant, so that they can go inspect what was happening from an operational side at that point in time. So again, trying to pull all of those individual data points together is tough, but if you start to say, well, let's look at the exceptions or a certain threshold, it starts to narrow it down.
Wow, I just thought of something. Sensors, I could just think in a chemical storage area, if you had a sensor that detected a specific chemical escaped out of the drum or barrel, it would sound an alarm, but it would automatically log that as an environmental event in GenSuite. You wouldn't have to actually manually enter it. You would just go in and follow up with some stuff. That's great stuff.
We've talked with some of the forklift groups.
Yeah.
You go into any manufacturing facility and they're all banged up.
Yeah.
Nobody's reporting the fact that they hit something.
Correct. Yeah.
But all of the new ones have gyroscopes on them. So you can do certain sensors, the amount of force that's been hit or what it's run into.
Right.
So again, it can create an event and find a way to save you some money as you're going back to renew that contract with said provider.
Now, if we can get it on a first aid box, that's my biggest pet peeve. I'll go into a facility for the same reason. I'll see the damage on a forklift or a rail, but no reports. Same thing with first aids. Mm-hmm. Somebody goes into a first aid box, half the Band-Aids are gone, but nary a first aid report. So, I think people get freaked out about it, but I think the more we make it sort of automated, it's automatic, it just happens. I think the easier it is and it all goes into the pool, right? It's all data, but you don't know what you need to track until you need to track it. So Correct. If you have the data there, you can then pull for that for trends and things like that. But AED doors that go off, we have the audible alarm, but those should be connected. All that stuff can be connected. I see a future where we have a system where all these things talk to each other and tie together instead of separate individual pieces of tech we buy and just have them. It's just like you said, it's everywhere, but not where we need it, like in one spot. So.
Okay, thank you both for the great insights and comments. I feel like we can talk about the technologies forever, for days. So I'd like to wrap things up with a quick question that will take us into the future of smart tech. So which frontier or emerging technologies you see could be the front runners to enter into mass adoption in facilities? So Blaine.
I'd still go with the smart fabrics and, as far as the ultimate wearable. I've seen them being the experiments and development in the fire service, military, being able to track everything from biometrics to the environment, certain conditions, and integrate sort of the devices that we now use separately, phone, watch, and into some fabric. But the thing that I think we have to get past is we have all these things. Like if I want an infrared camera, FLIR makes a little device that snaps onto my iPhone, and it's relatively small. It uses up a lot of energy, a lot of battery, right? How do we integrate that into a headgear, a headpiece? The heads-up display, what's going to drive that display, the Bluetooth, the SIM card. We've got to get that piece, the hardware, right. I think that's going to, in the future, what's going to make a lot of this stuff more adoptable, I think, is not the concept, but the actual hardware. The actual how it fits, how we wear it, and how we power it. I mean, some of this stuff's going to take a lot of juice, so I'm not going to tow a battery around with me. But I think the future is going to be alternative power sources, solar maybe integrated into some of these fabrics. I know there's some weird stuff, but I just love this stuff, and I think the smart fabrics, in the future might get a little more adoption. I'd like to see that.
I feel like you just recommended the industry to come to one standard for USB,
right?
Let alone a power to supply it. But some really interesting things. I don't disagree with you. I think things like smart fabric, again, groups like Cintas, they're producing the uniforms. Mm-hmm. If they can start producing them with the smart fabric, all of a sudden you as a company have all of this extra data about those employees. It's going to be a fascinating journey that takes. But I think something that can be easily adopted now is as new equipment is being purchased, they're all coming with things like beacons and beacon technologies or something that we've experienced as well, where as you're approaching a device, it can let you know that something's wrong. It can let you know that it has a pending inspection assigned to it. It can let you know that a certain belt has been running at a higher rate of frequency than it should be. So I think those are some things that are already implemented at facilities, as well as in new equipment that you're adopting or purchasing to put into your facilities. That, again, if we can connect that EHS and that operations team to understand that there's more than one benefit to using that technology, we can start to get some immediate payout while we're waiting for some of these other ideas to come to fruition.
Right.
Great. The future is definitely bright. And with that, we are just about out of time. I want to thank our GenSuite panelist, Doc Martin, for joining me on today's show. And of course, our special guest, Blaine Hoffman, for being a part of the conversation today. Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for listening to The Voice of GenSuite. Look forward to a new episode every other month. You can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, or at our website, gensuite.com.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Voice of Gen Suite. You can check it out over there on their podcast as well. I wanted to play that for you. I got some great information. It was a fantastic episode down there. I got to go on site, meet with their team, and record that in their offices in Cincinnati, Ohio. A great group of folks. They work hard every day to make sure they bring the best. They're on the cutting edge of EHS compliance technology and software. It's developed by EHS professionals for EHS professionals. I know this. I have been working with Gen Suite again for years. I use their service and software every day, even now. Look, rest assured, this is a tool I use, I rely on every day. I've implemented it in organizations, and I'm doing it again today. So go check them out, gensuite.com. And while you're on the web, go ahead and check out our incredible partners in safety, who'sonlocation.com and mightylinetape.com/podcast. Go check their services out as well. They have partnered with me to help make this podcast happen. So they're an important part of the Safety Pro podcast and bringing this to you every week. So go check them out as well. And until the next Safety Pro podcast, as always, be safe.